Okay, today's meeting is on JavaScript, and we'll be using the same code we wrote last week. And if you weren't here last week, we have starter code in the Discord announcement, so you can download it there. So what is JavaScript?
So going back to the analogy we were using last time where we were saying that HTML is like the skeleton and CSS is like the skin, JavaScript are like the muscles of your site. So it's going to be what does a lot of the logic and what's a lot of the programmatical side of things. And the syntax is pretty similar to Java. If any of you have taken computer science courses here, it's curly braces for blocks, very similar declaration, but it's weakly typed and it's dynamically typed. So some examples of what that actually is going to mean for you is that in Java, you can say like you have to define that something is an int when you are making a variable or a string, whatever. But for JavaScript, you can just use the word let for any variable. There's const, let, and var are the three types. We'll go into that a little bit more. But you can redefine things to change types, you can change values, and you don't have to specify exactly what type it's going to be when you're declaring the variable. And so for what JavaScript is actually used for in the context of web development, it's going to change how your site looks, so it's going to be able to move things around, it's going to be able to place things, it's going to be able to remove items, things like that. It's going to be able to detect changes, so when the user does an action on your site or when interacts with it, or other like network requests, things like that.
So network requests, if you want to like fetch the weather data for today, you could do that. Or if you have a server, you could push your data to your server. And then the next thing is like actual device things. So if you want to request the camera and mic and take a picture on your site, you can do that. And finally, storing data locally. And we'll be doing like local storage, so you can save your data between reloads. Okay, so get into it now.
Yeah. So if you guys were here last time, we have this is the same HTML code that we wrote last meeting. And just for when you're making a JavaScript file in your VS Code, you can just right click and hit new file, or just icon up here, same thing. And we're gonna call it script.js. .js is going to be the file extension for JavaScript files, and then this is where we're going to be doing our code. And then to link that into our HTML from before, you just want to go to the end of your body tag, so right here at the bottom outside of everything else, and just make a script tag. And so that is what we're going to do there is going to define what the JavaScript file is. So similar to how we were using the link up at the top for rel style sheet for our CSS, we can just put a script tag with src script.js or whatever your JavaScript file is called, and that's going to tell the HTML file where to get the JavaScript code from. So if we save that and just run it on our live server. So you can see here, this is same website we made before, equally as ugly as before, don't worry. And then if you just hit Control-Shift-I or go into the developer tools, that's just the shortcut for it. It'll take us into here. And in the console tab, we can use this to read the output of our JavaScript. So these are just kind of, don't worry about these.
Logs from my extensions. Extensions also have access to a console, so they'll be logging sometimes.
There you go. So yeah, that's just where we're going to be able to see the output of our program in our Chrome browser. So we're not just running a basic file in VS Code with no point, but just for the beginning of JavaScript, just some things that may come a little bit different from other languages. For JavaScript, for when you're printing things to the console, instead of doing something like system.out.println for Java, we're just going to do console.log, and that is going to take a string argument of whatever we want to say into the console. So we're gonna save that, and then this, in JavaScript, you don't need semicolons at the end as well. And then we're gonna go here, and we can see that our code was run here, just automatically by, with live server, it'll refresh automatically when we save, and we can see the hello world here. Again, this is just an extension that he has on his computer, but ignore that.
We can fix that.
Or do you want just to save it?
There we go. More extensions.
Yeah, perfect. Sweet. So then again for our, okay. Here, and then again for when we're declaring variables, in JavaScript, we're just gonna use the let keyword and then just the variable name. And then you can define it anything you want. So there's a number type, which is integers, doubles, floats, all of them are categorized under the number type in Java. And then there's obviously strings, which you can define with single quotes or double quotes. Or then there's also Boolean values. So it's true or false, similar to other languages you've seen. And then, yeah, those are pretty much the basic ones for now. And then you also have very similar operators. So if we do x equals x times 2, and then print x, or, oh god, I was just doing a Python project earlier, I'm sorry. Console.log x, and then we can go and see in our console, it prints out 24. Yep, multiplication operator, very simple. And then there's also similar methods for things like strings in JavaScript as well. So if we wanted to do console.log str, which is the string variable we defined earlier, dot to uppercase. Save that, and we'll see the high is in all caps here, where it was not before. And then as well, when you're defining strings, instead of doing things like if you have now this variable x that you wanted to put into a string, you could either do let, you could do concatenation, where you add them in, or you could do something like the number is plus x plus an exclamation point, and then it'll, oh my gosh, why is your, there we go. And then you can print that out, and you can see that it is still contains the number in the string, so very similar. Or there in JavaScript, there's a very nice way of doing it where you can use the backtick for quotation marks, and you can do something that's called a template literal string, where it is, if we say let template is what we can call it, equal, and then we define the string with our backtick quotation marks. You can do this, and then you can put a $ curly brace, and then you can put your variable directly into the string, so it formats it much easier for you. So you don't have to worry about a lot of pluses or anything like that, and you can define variables directly into the string and making it easier for everyone. So if you do something like that, you'll see back to our console, same thing. So that's a really nice feature to use in JavaScript, especially when we get further down the line into things like state and React and things like that. It'll come in handy. And then, yeah, similar operators as well. So if we have our Boolean variable true, so if we do console.log bool or console.log not bool. So the exclamation point is the not operator in JavaScript. Also, I'm sure many of you have seen this before. So we'll see a true and a false. It inverts it. Yeah. And then we get into what's really fun for JavaScript, which is arrays. because there's a little more to them than meets the eye. You can define them like this. If we just have a list of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, very simple. And then you can index them with square brackets. So if I wanted to go list 2, and go here, you can see that's the number 3. They're 0 indexed lists. And then you can iterate over them. But for JavaScript, when you're doing a for loop and you're iterating over a list of items, you have to use the let keyword again, and then you can just let list item in is going to be your for loop there, the keyword for your for loop to go over the iterator of it, in list, and then you use curly brace to enter that block. And you can just see it'll print out all of the items in our list. And then for the array methods in JavaScript, one of them that is going to come the most handy is the map method. So if you have our list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 above, we can do list mapped equals list.map, and you're going to put something that's called a callback function into here. So this is where you're going to, instead of just putting a normal parameter into the function, it's going to be with this arrow syntax. So you're going to have just a normal parentheses with a equals sign, greater than sign, and then curly brace. And this is where you can define, for every item in this array, the map function is going to take it in as a parameter, and you can name that parameter here. So item, for every item in this list, it will run whatever code you put into this curly brace on it, and then replace the old item with it in this list mapped list. So if I wanted to say, well, first I should probably do that right. We can do item times equals 2. Yep. And then you have to, since this is a full block of code, you have to return the item now. And so what this is going to do is it's going to take every item in our list, multiply them by 2, return it, and it's going to swap it out in the list. So if you wanted to console.log the list before, and then you can console.log the mapped version, we can see that in the first one we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So it goes through and it can modify in each item in the list. And you can also put logic in here as well, so it can do it to some, not others, that kind of thing, which is also what the filter method can help with in an array. Sorry. So if we say let filtered equal list.filter, and this is going to be the same kind of arrow, I can't talk today, I'm sorry, arrow callback function. So similar structure as what we saw before. You can call it whatever you want, item, and then you can say, this is where you're going to put in a Boolean condition. So you can do return item modulus 2 equals 0. So that is essentially checking whether the item in the list is even. And if the condition returns true for the item in the list, it'll keep it in the list. If the condition returns false, it'll remove it. So we can console.log filtered and go back, and we can see it only keeps the numbers 2 and 4 in the new list because 1, 3, and 5 are odd.
And one thing to note is that these methods, they don't change the original list, they just return a new list. So nothing happens to the original.
Yeah. And then one last thing for another useful array method is going to be the join method. So if we're going to call this just S, this is going to, oh, that is not the right button. Okay. You can do list.join, and then this just takes a normal parameter where you can define any separator you want. So if I wanted to do a dash, then I can console.log S, and you can see that 1-2-3-4-5. So it'll basically just put whatever joiner you put in the parentheses in between each item and return a string. So if you have an array and you don't want to do these and you wanted to say just add or remove, instead of dot append, well, I guess there is a dot append, but for an array you can do list.push. So if I wanted to push the number 10 into it, that adds it at the end of the array. So then you can console.log the list, and you can see now our list is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. And then you can also list.pop. And this doesn't need any arguments, and this will just remove the last item in that. And you can then again console.log the list. You can see now it no longer has the 10. Yeah, and then also in JavaScript, there are objects like there are in other languages. So if you want to define an object, you just, no, not list, let. You define it with a curly brace. So this is going to be in the JSON format. The objects in JavaScript follow JSON, which is JavaScript object notation. And basically the way you're going to do it is going to be a bunch of key value pairs in the object. So it's going to be key, value, and then you can do any data type you want for the values, but the keys are just normal text. Well, it'll get stored as a string, but or a number, but you can put, you don't need to put or quotation marks around it. And then you can also say if I wanted to give it an age 2, I wanted to, it's comma separated as well, similar to other things. But if I wanted to console.log the object that we just made, you can see in the console key value age 2, and it's in the same kind of format that we defined it in the program, where it's curly braces and it's comma separated key value pairs where they're colon separated. And then if you wanted to get a specific property from an object, so if we wanted to do, say, console.log object.age, if we just wanted the age of it, you would use that. So it'll say 2 there. You just do dot and then the key of whatever property you want to access, or you can also index it as a string. So if you use the square bracket and then put a string in there as age, it has the same effect as that. And if you wanted to define a new key for an object, say you wanted to expand on an object later after it's already been created, you can just add it in there with an equals declaration. So if I wanted to say new key, you just do object.newKey equals new value. And then if I console.log the object, you can see that it now has the new key, new value pair in there, as well as all the other ones before it. And then last thing you can do is you can iterate over objects and their keys. So if you wanted to say let key in object.keys object. So object is the object class where it is a static method, and then you can pass the object into the parentheses of the keys method to then get an iterator of all of the keys in that object.
And then object.keys returns a list. So if you just were to log object.keys, it would return key, age, and new key as strings. And then we're basically just iterating over that like we iterated over our list in this case.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot the quotation marks, but oh, I don't.
Try again.
Slow today.
Try again.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, that objects in JavaScript. I don't know what the console's doing there, but
Oh, it's because we were doing keys object. Why is object an array? What? Okay, that is weird. Let's try key of object and see what this does. Object is not iterable. Okay, buddy. Okay. We'll leave it. Console.object returns this key. Yeah, whatever. Okay, next thing we're going to do nested objects. So objects can have objects as values. So if I'm going to make 3 like sub-objects, we're going to call them children. So let child1 equals name, I don't know, Jack. Age 18. Let child2 equals name Bob. Age 16. Let child3 equal name age 33. Okay, so we have 3 child objects, each has a name and an age. So, and then finally we're going to make a parent object. So let's parent equals name Joel. And then we can have an array as the children. So let's do child1, child2, child3. And then if I log this parent object, we get this. So you see that it has a children and a name just like we defined it, and within children, if we expand it, each of these children has an age and a name. And DevTools has a really nice object explorer where you can just see everything about an object. So that's our parent. I'm going to comment all the old logs out because they're kind of cluttering it up. So we'll do a little array iteration. So our first thing we're going to do is try and get the third child's name. So to do that, we do parent.children. So now we're getting this array of children. And then we're going to index it. So we want to get the third child, so 0, 1, 2, children 2. And this will give us our third child. Next is a little function. So we're going to, or not a function, we're going to try and find the youngest child given our parent object. So let's do, first thing we gotta do is to find a youngest child. So this is kind of like a basic algorithm. For const, or let current child in parent.children. So we're iterating over parent.children, and our like iterator variable is current child. So if I log current child, why is this happening? That makes no sense. Okay, I guess we'll, oh shit, it's parent.children object. No, this is fine. So let current child in parent.children. Does that make sense to you? Our arrays are acting like objects, and our objects are acting like arrays, which is odd. this is the correct syntax. Isn't that weird? What I'm gonna do? Let's try and run this in our console instead. Okay, I'm just gonna run it in console instead. So if we do for let current child in current children, now it should work. Have you ever seen that before?
No,
Ever? Okay, let's try and go to a different
interesting
runtime
over here. If you just want to keep going, I try to figure it out.
Oh, are you kidding? Okay. Oh, we got it. Execute this too. Oh, it's 4 of. Oh, we're two. Okay, so in is for Python, and of is what we should have taught you. But yeah. Okay. So if I go back here, let me get rid of all this stuff. Sorry about that. So for this stuff, or for let key in, it should be for let key of, and then same thing up here. If I go here, for list item of list. So let me reload this. If I go back, I think it was for list item of list, it's this one. So we're logging 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the correct way to do it. I think before we got confused by the indexes were the same.
Oh.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, for let of to iterate over arrays. So let's go back here. Uncomment this stuff. So children. If I log this, then this has to be of. It'll log our children. So let me get rid of these two. We have three children, so that is stored in our current child variable. Next thing we gotta do is if the youngest child is null. Oh, also null. Null just means like something that doesn't exist. So we're gonna set our youngest child to null since we haven't found a youngest child yet. So if our youngest child is null, so if we don't have a child already, or, so this double pipe is the same as or in Python, or same in Java. Current child dot age is less than youngest child dot age. Then we are going to do youngest child equals current child. So pretty much if we don't already have a youngest child, then this will be true and it'll set the youngest child to the current child that we're on. Otherwise, if we do have a youngest child, we're going to see if the current child's age is younger than the youngest child. And then if so, again, we do a setting. Then if I do console, and then after that, we're going to do parent dot favorite child equals youngest child. And let's see what parent has. So if I look at parent, it has a favorite child, and its age is 16, which is the lowest, so we successfully got the youngest child. Next thing is functions. So functions let you do repeatable logic. So let's make a function by just saying function and then the function name. Let's say do something. Num1, it'll take two numbers, num1, num2, and then unlike Java, these don't have to take type parameters, so they're just the variable names. And then we're going to add them together. So let sum equals num1 plus num2, and then we will return the sum. And then if I do console.log do something 2, 2. Alright, let's do 2, 4. It'll return 6. So 2 plus 4 is 6. Next thing is an anonymous function. So this syntax for an anonymous function is less common, but it's still used in some places. Const anonymous function, or sorry, let let anonymous function is equal to function num1 num2. So here we replace our function name with just function. And we have to assign this to a variable. So this variable will now contain our anonymous function. Since this is not a function technically, it's more of like a value or an object. It's weird how it works internally for JavaScript. So for this we'll do the same, or we'll do something different. Let's do let difference equals num1 minus num2, and then we'll return the difference. And then this is called pretty much the exact same way as the other normal function. So anonymous function 6 minus 2, we get 4. That's correct. And then finally, the last syntax for arrow function or anonymous functions. This is what you saw earlier with the dot map. So if we do let arrow function equals and then parentheses, so any arguments now go here in the parentheses. So we got rid of function and the function name entirely. It's just parentheses now. Let's do num1 num2, and then we do this equals greater than sign, and then that's just saying this returns, or I guess this runs whatever's in this block. Then here we're going to do let power equals num1, and then times is for exponents, num2. And then let's, I have to return it to return power. Then if I do console.log arrow function 2, 4, this should return 16. And also arrow functions, they have another benefit. So another alternate syntax is you can just remove these curly braces here. If we just put parentheses here, we can now do num1 times num2. We can exclude our return. This just returns whatever is in this expression. We can even remove these parentheses if we want. And this should give us 16 still. And this is how we did our map. So again, we do, let's do that later. So this is our arrow function. And this is most common for anonymous functions. Okay, I think that's it for the base.js. Now let's actually work on our app. So I'm going to rename this to foundation.js and put it somewhere else. So this is no longer linked. And then I'm going to make another script.js with what we actually want. So first thing we're going to do is add a new element below submit. So I'm going to get rid of this inspect. Under submit, under this like questions and submit thing, this is kind of like what we're going to be focusing on today. I'm going to make a paragraph element. So again, this is for text. And I'm going to call it result, or I'm going to put result in it. And then I'm going to set its ID to result. Okay, and then go back to the code. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to fetch our element within JavaScript. So the way we like get elements inside JavaScript is we do okay, first let's make a variable. Let's call it result element equals, let's do result text. Document dot query selector. So this selects elements similar to how CSS selects. So if we go back to CSS, let's say we want to get our submit button. This is our selector, and JavaScript just this query selector function just takes one of these as a string. So our ID here is result, so we just put hashtag result. And if I console.log result text, here's our result element. So this one, if you hover over it, it'll show exactly where it is within the inspector, which is nice. Okay, and then document itself is like a global object. So anywhere in JavaScript you can use document. And it has like a bunch of different things. So you can get like the body element by just doing body, and this body element, as you remember, is just everything, right? So that's body. It also has a bunch of other stuff. I think it's related to fetching permissions. I don't know, but it has a lot of features. It's just a global object So if you look at document, here's our entire DOM tree. Yeah, and it has a function query selector, which we can use to fetch our element. Yeah, so then we're going to do console.log. So now, what if I want to get what's inside result, like the text here? So if I go to our text element here, the text result is within this p tag. So if I do console.log result text dot inner HTML, and that's exactly what it sounds like, inner, like inside HTML. Then we will get result. But inner HTML is kind of unsafe. So inner HTML, if we set it, then we can set like whatever elements we want. So instead of that, we're going to do inner text. So if I do inner text, it's the same thing, but it just converts everything to text. And if I were to use this to set something, so here I'm going to do result text dot inner text equals new result. Now we get new result here. So we changed what's displayed on our thing, which is cool. And then the difference between inner text and inner HTML is that if I do inner HTML here, nothing different will happen because we didn't pass in like anything different, right? It's still a string, but what happens when I put a button here as text? So this is kind of weird. Button as text within JavaScript. Now we get an actual button, but I don't want that, right? So what if like I'm fetching a comment on a website, and if someone just types like this text here, now I can just render a button on my site. I don't want that. So if I do inner text, it'll display it as text, which is what we want. Something funny within this is this is like one of the main security vulnerabilities that used to exist a long time ago. I think it's called cross-site scripting, XSS. If you do put a script tag, you can run JavaScript on whoever, like on other sites, which is not good. If I go back here, oh, look, HTML. Now this JavaScript is gonna, I guess they patched it. I think modern browsers don't let you do it anymore, but you used to be able to, if you call alert, it pops up this thing here. I think you may have seen this before, but alert lets you pop up one of those. One thing you could do is just put like a script tag and then alert in there and it'll pop up, which is funny. Okay, next is fetching our button. So let's do, okay, I'm gonna put this back to result. And then I'll set this back to inner text. Okay. So we'll get our button element now. It's the same thing. Let button element equals document.query selector hashtag. I think it's just called submit button, not button. So here's our button. Oops. Yeah, here's our button. And we can detect when this element is clicked. So when our button is clicked, we can do something. So let's make a function that runs when our button is clicked. Let's call it click handler. Let's say console.log button clicked. And then we're going to also update our result text. So I'm going to remove this so we can see that it's getting updated. Console.log, or no, sorry, result text, yeah. Result text dot inner text equals new, or clicked, exclamation point. So if I go here and I click our submit button, oh, first I have to attach the click handler. So this just makes a function. This function never runs. So we got to actually make it run. So we're going to do btn element dot add event listener. So events in JavaScript happen when the user interacts with elements. So there are several types of events, but pretty much it's just click when you click something, any element. Doesn't have to be a button. You can pretty much just do something if like this image is clicked if you want. There's change events. So when you type into an input, you could call an event. Or if you move your mouse, that's an event too. You can make some pretty cool effects with that. So I'm going to make a event listener for click. So the first argument you pass into this add event listener method is the event in a string, so it's click. And then the second is a function. So we're going to pass in our click handler. And notice that we don't call it. We don't put parentheses here, because that would just pass the return value of this function, which we don't want, which is null. So it doesn't exist. So if I do this, it actually passes the function. Now if I click this, if you look at it, it'll turn to clicked, and it'll log a log. So 14 or 17, 18 logs for button clicked. Next thing is something weird you can do. Let's keep track of how many times we click the button. So let click count equals 0. So initially we haven't clicked our button. So we're going to add another element. Click. And then here we're going to use a arrow function instead of a normal function. So again, arrow functions just let you pass in like just functions as a kind of like a what do you call it? A value. So we're just going to pass in a function, and then in this function that will run every time you get every time the button gets clicked, we're going to say click count is equal to click count the previous click count plus 1, so we're going to increment it, and then we're going to say result text dot inner text, and then we're going to use our format strings again. So let's say clicked, we put our $, curly brackets, and then click count times. So it's going to say clicked, I don't know, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Now if I go here, it updates, which is cool. And also notice that the previous event listener is also working. You can have multiple on it at the same time. But for now I'm going to remove that because it kind of sometimes can interfere with this. But yeah, our text here is getting updated properly. That's good. You can also like do something in, say we want to update this flashcard object here, or this image here, not object. So let's copy our event listener, and let's do document dot query selector. Now let's get our image. I don't think I did put an image ID on image. It's just hashtag image, and then so this is our image element. Then we can do dot source. So remember how we have our source here? We can just set it to whatever we want. So let's say exclamation point clip art. I don't like that one. Let's find a good one. These suck. Okay, this is good. We'll copy image address, and we'll paste it in here. Oh shit, sorry, other one. I gotta do dot source equals and then that. So if I go back here, if I click it, this changes to a exclamation point. What's next? Oh, PX. So we can also change styles. So let's say our little result thing here, we want to make it bigger. This text, we want to make it bigger every time I click the button. So let's do that again. Copy this, get rid of this because we don't care about click count. We already incremented in the previous one, right? So let's do result text dot style dot font size. So in CSS, things are like separated with a dash, font dash size. Generally the styles inside JavaScript are just camel case. So you have font, and then it's the same word, but the second word is capitalized. Let's do font size equals click count times 4, because we want to make it a little bigger, and then px. So if click count was 2, this value would be 8px, like that. And that's how CSS wants it. So if I click it, it gets bigger. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, and let's say I want to, let's style it. Here, I want to do something. Result transition font 0.3 is okay. So now it's gonna get bigger slowly or smoothly. So yeah, that's cool. I don't want that though. Okay, I'm gonna comment all this out, and we're gonna move on to like actually what I want to do today for our app, which is local storage. So local storage is something that the browser saves every time we reload. So if I reload now, right, we have this click count of 37 saved, but if I reload, it's gone, right? Our click count is back to that. It's back to 0 every time I reload. So what if I want to save that? Because my user might like come back to the site after they closed it. And that is where local storage comes in. So local storage is like this, again, like a document. It has this, it's like an object. It has properties. So the way we set properties is we can do local storage dot set item. The first argument is a key. So this is kind of like an object. Let's say key. And then the second argument is a value. Let's do 0. No, let's do 30. So if I do local storage dot get item key, this double quotes here, then it'll return 30. And local storage, everything has to be a string. So notice how this one's a number, but when we get it, it's a string. So that may give some problems when you're making your app. So we'll get over it though. Let's say we have this question field, right? But let's say we want to save all these questions. I'm going to do something. So button element dot add event listener. We're going to put our listener here, and then we're going to set our result text. I should have commented out these, but we don't want that. We want to set it to the contents in this questions thing. But the way we get the contents of the questions thing is, let's do input question input equals document dot query selector. I think it's called question input. Okay. Hashtag question dash input. We can do question input dot value, and then I also have to do inner text. So if I do that and I type in something, it's going to update this to our string. But if I reload it, it's gone, and we can only store one at a time, right? So if I do that, yeah. Also, I want to clear my question input. I want to clear its value. So I'm going to set it just like inner HTML. We just do dot value equals empty string, and if I do this, it gets cleared. So we have our local storage item, but at the beginning, so what we want to do is basically store an array of question strings inside our local storage. But the problem is, by default, we don't have our key. So let's say I want to set our key to questions, but at the beginning we don't have questions. Questions doesn't exist. So we have to set the item if this doesn't already exist. So the way we do that is if get item questions is null. So if it doesn't already exist, then I want to set item questions to an empty array. And this is a string because, again, arrays in or anything in local storage has to be a string. And I'll tell you more about how to get it out of a string. Otherwise, we are going to do local storage dot. So now we know, like, if this is false, then getting questions succeeded. So we actually do have something in questions. So if I do get item questions, let's say let questions equals this. We have this basically in our questions thing. How do we turn this string into an actual array? Well, that's where JSON.parse comes in. So JSON.parse, it's a method of this JSON class that takes in a string and returns an actual like object. So if I want to put 1, 2, 3, 4, this returns an actual object. And this works with objects as well. So you can put keys and values, whatever. So basically we're going to do questions is json.stringify questions by console.log questions. Then questions. Then it'll return our, sorry, parse, not stringify. It'll return our little empty array. So now we have our questions, but how do we add things to our local storage? That's where this comes in. So on click, we gotta do stuff. Instead of setting result text, what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna get my questions, and then I'm gonna parse it. So same code here, I'm just gonna copy it so you can reuse it. And then I'm going to, so now we have our questions, and then recall that we can do questions.push to add to the end of the array. We're gonna push our question input.value here. And then, so now if I log console.log questions, I click it, it'll return an empty or an array with only one element, a string in it, whatever I put in the questions. Yeah, so now we have to turn this array back into a string, and JSON, just like we did JSON.parse, we have to do JSON.stringify. So I typed that earlier, but I didn't mean it, but this time I do. So we'll do local storage.set item. So this sets the entire questions key to JSON.stringify questions. So let me comment this out and show you what JSON.stringify actually returns. Okay, so if I click something here, now this is a string. This isn't actually an array. It's a string that looks like an array. And these two, like parse and stringify, are basically inverses of each other. You can, let's copy this. JSON dot parse this, or stringify, sorry. Oops. We can pass this as an array, not a string. And then then you can see the return value is a string with this. And then if I call JSON.parse again on it, it'll return an array again. So you can kind of use them as inverse functions. So we're going to stringify it again to put it back in local storage as a string. And yeah, but as you can see, nothing happens. And if I look at local storage dot questions, our local storage is getting updated, but we aren't actually doing anything here. So I gotta now do something to our result element. So result element, or result text dot inner HTML. This time I'm gonna use HTML because I gotta add a line break element. So back here, remember we use this BR element to add like an empty line. You're gonna do the same thing. So let's do, now we have our questions array. It's already an array, right? So we can just do questions.join, and then the separator will just be BR. And then if I wanna do this up here when I fetch my questions. I wanna put it here. So yeah, when I reload, these are saved questions, and I'm just gonna keep adding them. I can add as many as I want. If I reload, it'll still be there when I even like close out the tab. Oops. Okay, yeah. It's still, oh, I have to go to 127. 127.0.0.1. There we go. So now all our things are here. So as you saw, localhost and 127 are the same, but the things is local storage is unique to each URL. So this is a different URL, so it's not going to save the same local storage. Yeah, this is our questions. We're right about against the time, but I want to put a clear button because we can. Let's do a button ID clear button, and this is just going to clear our local storage. And just really quick, document dot query selector clear button dot add event listener click roll. And then we're gonna fetch our questions again. Actually, no, we don't need to do that. We just need to local storage dot set item questions, and we're gonna set it to an empty array again. And then our result text dot inner HTML. Now that we know it's empty, we can just set its inner text to quotation marks. So if I click clear,
Hashtag clear button on this one.
oh, yeah. So my selector didn't have a hashtag, so it didn't select the button. Now everything is gone, and I can add stuff again. Clear it again, reload. It's gone still. So, yeah, here is our little questions thing. We can style clear if we want later too, of course.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to. Okay. Thank you for coming. Next week we'll go over more advanced CSS like Flexbox. You can pretty much put buttons in any, or put any item in any layout you want. So let's say you want to center something or evenly space it. That's what we'll be going over next week. Yeah, same time, 7 p.m., 12:40 Tuesday.
Yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to stick around. If not, we'll see you guys next week.